All right, guys, welcome back to Downtown Rams. As always, I'm your host, Alexis Kraft, joined here with my co host, Jake Ellenbogen, and we are coming to you to recap our Week 18 win against the San Francisco 49ers in San Francisco, 21-20, and preview our wildcard matchup this weekend against the Detroit Lions in Detroit. Jake, this game against the 49ers, when we talked about it the last episode, it was going to be kind of a little it was weird in the sense of like we were seeing Carson Wentz versus Sam Darnold's. But we also touched on how like this is the 49ers. It doesn't matter who's playing, it doesn't matter who's starting. We want to win. We know it's not going to look normal. We don't have our normal squad out there. The 49ers didn't either. We weren't really sure what was going to happen, but we both predicted that the Rams were going to win, and the Rams did win. They inched it out by a point, but a win is a win. What was your biggest takeaway from this Rams win against San Francisco?
Yeah, I mean, I just got finished watching the tape yesterday or the other day, I guess 2 days ago now. And I got to tell you, I think the thing I was most impressed with isn't even just Carson Wentz, because I kind of expected this from Wentz. I thought he played really well, as expected. What I was impressed with is the fact that the Rams starters versus the 49ers starters up front. You watched Bobby Brown put the center on his ass. That's the starting center, Jake Brendel, for the 49ers. Put him right on his ass on the first drive of the game. You saw Trent Williams kind of getting pushed around a little bit. That offensive line showed a lot of glaring weaknesses I think the Rams could exploit in the next time they face them, whether that's next year, next season, or if it's 2 weeks from now. But that was good to see. I think that, it's one thing because obviously Stafford wasn't out there and Nakua was out there for only a half and Kupp wasn't, Aaron Donald, all that. I really wanted to see what the Rams looked like against their starters. And what I came away with was that really the 49ers, who drove down the field on that drive with all their starters and scored a touchdown, they were outplayed. Like, I'm going to be honest with you. I was really impressed with the Rams defensive line, namely Bobby Brown III, Kobe Turner, and I thought Ernest Brown, who unfortunately got cut on his birthday, he's now back on their practice squad. But I thought all three of those guys played extremely well on the defensive line. And what that showed me was really, why they scored is they had the support inside. The interior just continues to get better and better, Alexis. They're leading the league in win rate, in the defensive line. But the thing that tells me is that if they had an Ernest Jones in the second level of that defense at linebacker, they're not scoring that touchdown. So that was the problem, is that they're doing their job up front, but then you keep having that, moving the chains and whatnot. And of course, the Rams starters are out there, but you also have to remember, Deebo Samuel's really good. Brandon Ayuk's really good. But I felt really good about watching the Rams without Aaron Donald, the way that interior defensive line played against their starting offensive line. I felt really good about the way, Bobby Brown was disengaging off of double teams and triple teams. Kobe Turner was doing his thing. And then I felt even better, the way at the end of the game, the way they were able to close that thing out. Because look, 49er fans will say all they want. Oh, it doesn't matter because it wasn't against our starters. I'll tell you this right now. The gap was considerably closed, I think, in week 2, more than they want to admit. That game was close, and Nopum gets hurt at right guard, and now you're starting your third string right guard. The fact of the matter is this: they're a much different team than they were week 2. And I understand they didn't start Purdy or Christian McCaffrey, who, by the way, wouldn't have played. I was, hearing he would not have played if it was like an actual game because he was hurt. So we can stop saying he was held out. But, I just look at this, Alexis, like this is how you start to close that gap. This is how you start to kind of assert your dominance, to go on the road against the 49ers and win that game. I don't care who was playing. They got the job done. And by the way, that game was meaningful. We talked about it. They still had a chance to lose that 6th seed. And guess what? The way everything worked out, Seattle won. But guess what? The Packers also won. So because the Packers won, if the Rams lost that game, they would be playing in Dallas as the 7th seed. No 7 seeds ever won before. I do think that'll be different this week because I think the Packers beat Dallas, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, Alexis, I think the most important thing for me was watching how the starters operated. And oh, by the way, Charvarius Ward. Oh, let me just tell you this right now. Every 49er fan wants to act like Charvarius Ward is leaps and bounds better than Ahkello Witherspoon because they haven't watched Ahkello Witherspoon since he left the Niners in 2019. Only watches their team. They don't watch other teams. Not all of them, most of them. If I'm not mistaken, Alexis, that was Charvarius Ward on Puka Nacua, right? And Carson Wentz, who threw over the top of Charvarius Ward to Puka. That was Charvarius Ward,
Yeah,
right? Their Pro Bowl corner. Okay, that's what I thought. So yes, I think the Rams have started to close the gap. I really do. And look, the 49ers are still the better team. No one's saying they're not. The 49ers are still way more talented. That's what happens when you're not spending $75 million on guys that aren't on the roster. But the Rams are coming for him. And I'll tell you right now, they don't want to see him next week. If they end up playing next week, they don't want to see him then. They don't want to see him in the NFC title game. The Rams are the only team in the NFC that can beat the Niners, hands down.
I agree. And a lot of that, I think has kind of been floating around social media this week as well from people who aren't even Rams fans. I've seen
Yeah.
reporters and other analysts and broadcasters say that they think the only team in the NFC that can beat the 49ers is the Rams. So, especially hearing that and then seeing the win this week against San Francisco, I think the Rams are in a really, really good spot. Some of the things that I really like to see out of this game, the number one thing which you touched on is the defense. I thought the defense looked really, really good. I love, the young guys and how they just continue to get better every week. I mean, Puka Nacua breaking the record, both records, the receptions and the receiving yards, having that moment with his mom afterwards. Yeah, Jake's soft clapping over
The
there
golf
for those of
clap.
you who can't see the golf clap. Really, really excited and happy for him, that we got to witness that. And I think it was just a testament to an amazing season that he's had, which is, just absolutely incredible. So, yeah, overall, I mean, there's not, I don't think, as much to dissect from this game as there normally is. I would say I think we should focus more on our matchup against Detroit. And in order to start this off, I should say, let's touch on what you brought up before we started recording a little bit, not exactly, but let's talk about kind of this narrative of Matthew Stafford going back to what that means, because the story, I think, in like the media, I think out of all the playoff stories that there are this week, Matthew Stafford going back to Detroit is the one that I see consistently brought up because it's good, as you and I would say, it's good cinema. It's like a good juicy storyline that I think people want to talk about. So Jake, what are your thoughts on that situation?
Well, I'm going to bring up something you and I talked about off air for a while, actually, about how, we need storylines, right? Like it's all about the storylines. And man, have the writers cooked something up. Have you been paying attention? I certainly have. The Deshaun Watson trade partners just magically end up playing each other. Are you kidding me? Tyreek Hill going back, where it all started with Kansas City. Obviously, Jared Goff versus Matthew Stafford. Oh, by the way, Aubrey Pleasant revenge game. He was fired last year mid-season by the Lions. People forget about that. In the Mike McCarthy game, he gets to play against Green Bay. It's all out there. There's all these like crazy storylines that just magically
Writers
happened.
cooked.
Man, they really did. But no, I think this whole narrative is kind of funny because what I'll say is that I have a lot of respect for the Lions fans that subscribe to this channel, that follow me. Obviously, this is not directed at any of them, but I've noticed something. I've noticed that the Lions, their fan base a little bit has gone away from being the goody, not even the goody two shoes, just the easy people to root for, right? You want them to succeed. The Lions are likable and all of that. And coming into this game, Alexis, I've heard a lot of anti-Stafford stuff, including obviously the not wear the jersey. Obviously, let me just be the first one to say, because there's been a lot of misinformation out there. You and I both don't like that. The Lions themselves aren't going to escort you out of the game if you wear a Lions Stafford jersey. And they're not going to escort you out of the game if you wear a Rams Stafford jersey, because that is not American. That's not human. That doesn't exist. It was a movement that this apparel company, the same apparel company that had that really cringy Detroit Rams, jersey or whatever, that is that apparel company pushing that. The irony there. So that's not what's happening. But Alexis, I am noticing this anti-Stafford narrative, and I'm noticing more and more. Well, Jared Goff, and they're comparing the stats and leaving out the really important context there. With first off, Stafford won the Super Bowl. That's the elephant in the room that we have to address. But secondly, you notice how on all those graphics they don't put games played, because Matthew Stafford played 7 fewer games than Jared Goff, which, by the way, is a good thing, because that means Jared Goff has been more available, right? That's a good thing. If you also include that, though, it helps add context to why Jared Goff has more touchdowns, Jared Goff has more yards, Jared Goff has a lot more everything, because he hasn't played 7 games. Here's the fact. The fact of the matter is that both teams are good football teams. Both teams have had moments this season where they did not look like a Super Bowl contender. Both teams have had moments this season where they have looked like a Super Bowl contender. There's one team that's playing at home and there's one team that's playing on the road. And there's this common misconception where the Rams struggle on the road, which isn't true. They're very balanced. They've won 5 games at home, 5 games on the road. And I hate to break it to you, Rams fans, because I know a lot of you, obviously I'm not throwing necessarily shade at you, but we know even in home games, the Rams have had to play with a silent count. So why do we act like every single playoff game, when the Rams have experience playing with a silent count at home, every single playoff game, we're like, oh no, the Rams are going into a loud stadium and they're going to have to use a silent count? Like, Alexis, we were talking about, they were using a silent count against the Steelers. They were using a silent count against the 49ers. They use silent counts at home. This is nothing new. I actually prefer the Rams on the road, because I continue to believe that this team is a better road team, and it keeps the eyes on the prize. When you're at home, you get comfortable a little bit and all that. No, when you're on the road, it is all business. And look, I saw this team at MetLife Stadium. That was grit and grimy. That was considered a down game. That was considered a bad game. You know what they did? They scored 4 touchdowns. They scored 4 touchdowns in their bad game. So miss me with all of that. I think the narratives are very simple. A lot of people want the Lions to win. There are also quite a few people that want to see Stafford win, because he literally, I saw a TikTok, one of the Detroit fans is like, man, are you really going to hate on Stafford? That mofo died in Ford Field multiple times. It was resurrected, like right in front of us. He gave his life to this city, and you're going to root against him. And I thought about that, and I was like, look, it's the same thing. Like, if the roles were reversed, I would totally root against his team. But I think it's different. It seems like a lot of these people are starting to forget where they were 2 years ago, pulling for Stafford to win a Super Bowl and all that. So I'll just say this. We had the privilege of interviewing Kurt Warner, but before that, I had no bias except for the fact that he was the Rams franchise quarterback before he was given up on and cast aside. I still rooted for the Arizona Cardinals and New York Giants with him like they were my own team. I wanted that guy to succeed at all costs. If he played in the playoffs against the Rams, that would have been tough for me, because I would have just said, I want the Rams to win, but I want Kurt Warner to ball out. I was bitter because I felt like they gave up on him. You know what I mean? And they did. We know they did. That's what happened. People will say Bulger this, Bulger that. I have nothing against Mark Bulger. He wasn't Kurt Warner. The way they gave up on him pissed me off. I've seen things about Stafford, and it's like, it's not the full truth. This team wanted to start over. Stafford could have said, I'm coming back, and they would have said, but you're not, though, And I also hear this all the time, how, man, he has no reason to feel anything against Detroit. And I agree. Like, there's no reason for him to have any ill will against Detroit. But there's also no reason for Detroit to have any ill will against him, because guess what? If he wasn't as good as he was, he wouldn't have been as valuable as he was. If he was Joey Harrington, do you think the Rams are giving him all those picks? Absolutely freaking not. So because he was valuable, they were able to trade him. But then this last thing I'm going to say that I keep hearing, and it is just ridiculous. Well, They could have sent Stafford anywhere, and they sent him to the best place possible. Okay. Yeah. But who do you think paid the most? Who do you like? Do you really think the Panthers, Colts, and 49ers were going to offer as much as the Rams were? Because I hate to break it to you, but Jared Goff, while he wasn't the guy in LA to win the Super Bowl, he did play in a Super Bowl and he was still a starting level quarterback. So the Rams offered a package that was really good and the Lions took it. There was no like inside deal or anything. There was no like, oh, we want to get him to LA. No, 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 no. They took the best deal possible. No one else, and if they tell you that, they're lying. No one else offered anything better than the Rams. Okay, Jake ran over. Alexis, back to you.
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of the Matthew Stafford versus Jared Goff thing. And for starters, I think if anybody actually believed that jersey band meme, that's kind of concerning. I thought that uh, was pretty obvious that it was fake. I mean, no professional sports stadium is going to turn anybody in any jersey away. I mean, you could show up to that game in a Jaguars jersey and people would be like, "That's weird," but you're still going to get admission and you're still going to be able to view the game as normal. It's not like anybody who actually thought the Detroit Lions would ban people from wearing a Matthew Stafford Lions jersey to this game needs to evaluate themselves and how gullible they are, because that is just very far-fetched and not at all based in reality. Also, this whole notion, you know, people getting upset if people cheering for Matthew Stafford or cheering for Jared Goff. Listen, if you're a Rams fan and you love Jared Goff, that's okay. If you were a Lions fan and you loved Matthew Stafford, that's okay. But common sense would tell you that if they're playing on the other team and they're playing against your team in the playoffs, you shouldn't cheer for them. I don't think it's like a diss towards Stafford when Lions fans are saying that you shouldn't be cheering for Matthew Stafford on Sunday. I wouldn't expect them to. I think people are just taking this whole thing way out of context. I mean, I would respect the Lions fan base more if they made Matthew Stafford enemy number one. To like Jared Goff should make him enemy number one on Sunday. That's just the way it goes. It's the playoffs. It's one game. One team is going to win. One is going to lose. After that, we can go back to our regular scheduled programming and you can go back to loving Stafford or Goff as much as you want. But yeah, I think that this has just gotten like really crazy and really out of hand, and people are just trying to make narratives to create drama and make it seem like they have a reason to have a chip on their shoulder and whatever it is. But it's just like, get over it. Just watch the game. Let's like prepare as Rams fans. Let them prepare as Lions fans, and let's get to it. We'll see how it goes. But speaking of the game, Jake, let's start by looking at Jared Goff in this Lions offense versus our defense, because you and I were pretty high in the Lions going into the season. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people were high in the Lions going into the season. You know, Jared Goff, for a while, the Lions was looking really hot, looking really good. Uh, Amon-Ra St. Brown, David Montgomery, Jamar Gibbs, their rookie Sam Laporta. I mean, they looked really good for a long time. Then they kind of started to struggle a little bit. So, what are your overall thoughts on this Lions offense, and what do you think the number one thing our defense is going to have to look out for?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now the Lions are in kind of a weird predicament, right? I don't think they've played a game without Sam Laporta this year, not that I can recall. And it looks like Sam Laporta is not going to play. He didn't practice today. We're recording on a Wednesday. I think if you're going to play him in a playoff game, he would probably have to be practicing by Friday if he wants a shot. But I don't see it. I think there's too much risk there. So because of that, they're gonna have to change up their approach a little bit, change up their game plan. It does, not having him gets rid of the opportunity that it opens up other guys, right? Because you have to be cognizant of where Sam Laporta is at all times on the field. He's really, really good, one of the best tight ends in the league. But just looking at their offense, I mean, for the most part, aside from Sam Laporta, they are relatively healthy. We don't know what's going to happen with Khalif Raymond. He may or may not play, but you got Jared Goff. And here's the thing, the way Goff has played this year, if you keep him protected and upright, he could make you pay. It's when you start pressuring him, he turns back into what we saw, why the Rams moved on from him. He does not deal with pressure well, especially up the middle. The Rams defensive line is number one in win rate, up the middle. So, Jared Goff, he's going to have plenty of weapons per usual. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. Montgomery went over 1,000. Jahmyr Gibbs had 950 yards around that. I think the key is going to be to funnel to Amon-Ra St. Brown, get that connection going early on. He is kind of their do-it-all guy. He's not super, super fast, but he's fast enough where if he gets in the open field, he can make guys miss. Really good route runner, really good natural hands catcher, receiver. And he's hard to bring down. He's more built, he's bigger, right? So you have a guy like him. You have Jameson Williams, who's been a full participant in practice this week. You always have to be cognizant of what he can do over the top with that speed. I don't have to tell you, he's a St. Louis guy. You know him very well. But Jameson Williams is a lightning rod. I mean, what Tutu Atwell is to the Rams, that's Jameson Williams and then some to the Lions. I mean, he could end up being a superstar receiver when he puts it all together. And we've seen him, in bits and pieces where they will take that deep shot. Keep in mind, he missed most of the beginning of the season because of the gambling. So he's relatively fresh as opposed to some of these other guys. Then you have Josh Reynolds, the former Ram, that's chompy at the bit. The Rams didn't give him that second contract like he said that they were going to when he was drafted. But you see what he can do, and obviously, the deep shot, in the red zone. He has a great rapport with Goff going back to the Rams, so I'm sure he'll want to get one. Donovan Peoples-Jones, I keep going back to him. I really liked that move when they made it. I don't know if I predicted him to go there, but he was one of the picks I had getting traded. Look, he had over 800 yards last year for the Browns. He was a great returner as well. This year, he just kind of fell out of favor when they got Elijah Moore. I think with him, that size, obviously Detroit fans know who he is because he played as a Michigan Wolverine right in their backyard. But when you look at him, that size, that speed, just that ability to box defenders out. I mean, he was a guy I really liked, if you remember, in that draft that he came out of. And he stands out to me in this one because if Khalif can't go, I would imagine, DPJ is going to be the returner. I'd imagine that DPJ, who we started to finally see on the offense last week, we start to see him a little bit more in this game. Again, big target for Jared Goff. So that's something to keep in mind. Then you have two tight ends there, and James Mitchell and Brock Wright. Brock Wright's a full participant in practice. He's had, some touchdowns from Goff. And then James Mitchell, somebody, a fifth rounder out of Virginia, who I really like his overall game. And they used him a little bit last year. Last week. I like him. So if they don't have Laporta, they'll have some guys. It's going to be a little different, though, how they, operate. And that offensive line is, very healthy right now because you got Penei Sewell at right tackle. You got Graham Glasgow at right guard. Frank Ragnow is one of the best centers in football. And Sewell's one of the best right tackles in football, to the shock of nobody if you watched him at Oregon. Jonah Jackson, really solid left guard. And then Taylor Decker is, one of the better left tackles in football. So they have a really good offense, and there's a reason why they're among the best in most categories because just from top to bottom, I mean, just a really talented core. You could argue, I mean, maybe they're a receiver away from being the best offense in the league. But I mean, this is a really good offense. The Rams are going to have to be at their best because, any one of these guys could pop off. And when you have guys that can win in multiple ways, like Jahmyr Gibbs and just his speed, one of the fastest guys from this draft, or David Montgomery with his power and his contact balance, that's a problem. So yeah, this is not going to be an easy game. It's definitely not what I would say. But I do think the Rams have the pieces to handle this. They're just going to have to be well aware of where they are on the field because you can't be giving up giant bombs to Jared Goff and company. This is what they want to do. They want to test down the field. They want to take shots. And if the Rams give them those opportunities and those lapses in coverage we've seen as of recent, it could be just a giant shootout where it's nonstop scoring.
Yeah, I kind of like you touched on. I mean, the Lions have just a very talented offense. I mean, piece by piece, you go through it, weapons everywhere. I'm very curious to see, you mentioned how we can't let the Lions throw on us, downfield and everything. I think that, this defense should focus first on David Montgomery and Jamar Gibbs. I think if you can shut down Montgomery and Gibbs and then force Goff to have to make those throws, I'm not that confident that he's going to have such an easy time doing that. I think kind of what we talked about earlier is pressure on Jared Goff. I think if we force him to throw and we completely shut down David Montgomery and Jamar Gibbs and stop that rhythm from happening, we can do a good job shutting down this offense. I think that I really like personally how the Lions have used Montgomery and Jamar Gibbs together. I wish they would use Gibbs a little more, just as someone who had fantasy stock in him this season. It felt like, they definitely used David Montgomery more than they used Jamar Gibbs, but they used Jamar Gibbs more as a gadget guy. And I could see him giving the Rams trouble because of that. He's kind of like Kyron Williams-esque in the sense that you don't know how the Lions are going to use him when he's on the field. If you see Jamar Gibbs come out there, he could be running, he could be receiving, he could be a decoy. It's like you never really know what play they're going to run because he does it all. So I would think that the first priority for the Rams should be shutting those two guys down. But then you mentioned a guy like Jameson Williams, again, kind of like being used as a gadget guy. Like when you watch the Lions, it's like he could be rushing, he could be receiving, he could be going, 60 yards down the field and Jared Goff could be throwing it up for him. It's like you kind of don't know how they use him either. So it is going to be interesting to see how the Lions want to deceive the Rams. But I will say the loss of Sam Laporta is huge. This is a Rams team that does not do very well against tight ends. And Sam Laporta for the Lions has been arguably the most important player in their offense this season. I mean, he has completely taken that offense to another level. He's been Jared Goff's favorite tight end number. I know he was your tight end number one in the draft. He was definitely the rookie tight end number one in the league this year. So them losing Sam Laporta is a huge advantage for the Rams. It's just one less guy out there who we need to worry about. And I know that the Lions are going to be missing him on offense.
Yeah, I agree. I think, kind of looking at this Lions offense, really the name of the game, if you don't pressure Jared Goff in this one, the Lions are probably winning this football game. If you don't stop the run in this one, the Lions are probably winning this football game. But luckily for the Rams, they're starting to put pressure on the quarterback as of late, and they're one of the best teams against the run over the last 8 games. There's not many teams out there that are better than the Rams, and they're honestly one of the best teams in the playoffs against the run. So, here's the deal. Okay. When it comes down to it, is when you watch Jared Goff, and this is just the eye test, and I'll give you the actual stats that I have here, Alexis. But when you watch Jared Goff, I mean, he's really good at operating with what is available to him. Like if you give him time to throw, and you give him open guys, he's not sailing, passes over those open guys' heads. Like he's making plays that he's supposed to make. However, when you watch him, when he's pressured, whether it's a blitz or no blitz, and there's just straight pressure, he craters. And here's the deal is that watching him, I saw it, but then I looked up like his, because his analysis and everything, and little did I find out, he is tied for the second most interceptions in the league when he's under pressure. Stafford's only thrown 3, he's thrown 9. Stafford's thrown 10 touchdowns, he's thrown 6. So under pressure, Jared Goff struggles considerably. He's good against the blitz, 13 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, but his big time throws go down to 5, and his turnover worthy plays is 8. Guess what? This is crazy. Under pressure, he has 5 big time throws and 13 turnover worthy plays. He has 15 big time throws and 9 turnover worthy plays when he's not blitzed. And then he has 15 big time throws and 4 turnover worthy plays when he's kept clean. The bottom line is, if you have an elite offensive line and that offensive line really doesn't crack at all, right? And they keep him clean, he is virtually unstoppable, right? When he has to play out of structure, when he gets pressured, it's not just narrative spewing. That's not what I'm doing. The stats indicate that. 30 touchdowns, 12 interceptions for the year, but only 6 of those touchdowns have come under pressure, and 9 of his 12 interceptions have been under pressure. So the guy doesn't make a lot of mistakes when he has a clean pocket. But when you start pressuring the pocket, you start pushing guys into his lap, you get him going out, on the run. Now you've got him where you want him. And that's the thing where I think the Rams do bode well in this game, because what we've constantly seen, Alexis, all year, going back to, you can say Brock Purdy week 2, you could say Geno Smith week 1, although he did absolutely nothing. I think he was the worst mobile quarterback the Rams played this year based on how he played against them. But Anthony Richardson week 4, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Josh Dobbs, Tyrod Taylor. We saw it. Hey, Tyrod Taylor gave him a run for their money, right? I thought Sam Darnold did a nice job of getting out of harm's way until the end of that game last week. The bottom line is the Rams match up extremely well against quarterbacks that struggle against pressure and that can't run. And Jared Goff struggles against pressure and cannot run. And we've watched week in and week out, number 0, Byron Young, and his crazy speed chasing quarterbacks down the sideline. You feel bad because you're like, he's putting all this effort, but it's Anthony Richardson. You're not catching him. Jared Goff tries that. He's catching him, and it might be a forced fumble. This guy also has an issue with fumbles. So I really do feel good about this matchup for the Rams. I do think this offense is really good. But there is a concern. And if Jared Goff doesn't get that, time to throw, this could be a long game for him. And what I'll say is this: 2021, everyone just remembers Rams went and won the Super Bowl. Everyone remembers they got Von Miller, they had Leonard Floyd, they had AD. What they don't remember is how well that defense played, despite the fact that they were not playing like that with those guys before. And I would argue that they were better than the playoffs talent-wise, because they didn't suffer the loss of Jordan Fuller in the final game of the year, right? They didn't have to go out and get Eric Weddle out of retirement, right? So my thing here is, what if what we saw the last time the Rams were in the playoffs is just what Raheem Morris defenses do? Raheem Morris had that defense ready to go for the Super Bowl. And if he has this defense ready to go this time around, it's going to be interesting. So we'll see. But Alexis, they got to protect Jared Goff, or this thing is going to be interesting. I'll tell you that much.
So looking at the Lions defense, Jake, going up against our offense, it's interesting to kind of think about what our offense should do in order to be successful against the Lions defense. So the Lions defense is very successful against the run. I mean, they're among the best in the league at stopping the run. A big part of that, they've got Aiden Hutchinson, who everybody knows, very good player on their defense for them. So Jake, looking at our offense and Kyren Williams, who has been kind of the engine of this Rams team all year. I mean, we've already talked about a number of times what this Rams team looks like without Kyren, and just how big of an impact he has for them. It's going to be difficult, I think, to run against this Detroit team. Now, that's not taking anything away from Kyren. He's been great. Everybody knows how I feel about him. And, we've all seen what he can do this season. But statistically, it is hard to run against the Lions. It's not going to be easy. And this is a playoff game, so everything is already going to be that much harder. So looking at our offense, Jake, if you can't establish a run game, which I still think the Rams should try. I'm not saying we shouldn't run the ball. I'm just saying that I don't think we're going to be able to run the offense this game through Kyren as we have in many games this season. So if we're not able to run our offense through the run game, Jake, what do you think we need to do in order to be successful?
Yeah, so believe it or not, I do think they'll be able to run the ball, Alexis. I think Kyren will be able to have a game. I know Detroit is arguably a top 5 run defense over the last 8 games. I know Aleem McNeil's back. They got a Levi Wuzariki. They got Benito Jones. They got Charles Harris. They got all sorts of guys. Aiden Hutchinson's really good against the run. I get it. But at the same time, I think the Rams offensive line in the run blocking area has been one of the best in the league in that span. And I think they're starting to come into their own. And furthermore, I think Kyren Williams is getting better each game. So if he had 3 touchdowns the last time he played, what the hell is he going to do now? Obviously, I'm kidding. He's not going to go for 4 or 5 in this game. But I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised what he does. He's gotten to that point where you can't count him out. And my rule of thumb is when I watch the film and I watch, guys like Justin Matabike and what the Ravens have with those sideline to sideline, linebackers and Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith and how hard it is to run against that defense. If you can run against that defense, you can run against anybody. And the Rams ran against that defense. Kyron specifically had over 100 yards against the defense. I think it was 114 to be exact. So I look at this and I think, yeah, they can run the ball against this defense. I'm not too worried. It's going to be interesting, though, because what I think is the thing to keep an eye on is that if they do run the ball, great. If they can't run the ball, it's going to make it harder on Stafford. But one thing is you can't cheat in this one. You can't throw guys in the box, and just be like, all right, we're just going to sell out to stop Kyron Williams because Matthew Stafford's on the other side. He could still make plays, but yeah, it's not going to be easy. It's definitely not. So you can't assume anything, when it comes to the Lions.
So looking at the pass rush, Jake, and the passing game for the Rams, I mean, obviously Puka Nacua very hot right now. The Lions obviously know that. You got Cooper Kupp coming back, rusted week 18, but he's going to be out there against Detroit. Demarcus Robinson, who's also on a hot streak. And then, Tyler Higbee, who's kind of had a resurgence at the end of the season after having a little bit of a rough start to the season. You start to see Tyler Higbee get more involved. Then you got Davis Allen, who had a really good game against the 49ers. I think that they're going to use him as well. Looking at these weapons in the receiving game, going against Detroit and this, pass rush, what do you think the Rams' game plan is going to be? Because I'll tell you what, I don't think that Puka Nacua is going to have a 100-plus yard game against Detroit. That is not a knock on Puka. That is that I know that Detroit, as the rest of the league, is well aware of what Puka Nacua has been doing, and he's going to be guarded like no other against Detroit. I would suspect in this playoff game that they're going to do their best to try and contain Puka. So I think you're going to start to see kind of what we've seen in games past. Demarcus Robinson probably going to have an opportunity to shine. Cooper Kupp, as weird as it is to say, because he's one of the best receivers in the league, maybe now that Puka is having this emergence, maybe Cooper starts to get open a little more. Maybe you start to incorporate Tyler Higbee and Davis Allen a little more. I think that this is going to be a game where the Rams are going to be kind of forced to get creative a little bit because they're going up against a Detroit defense that I think is going to be prepared as much as they can be to go against Stafford and these Rams receivers. So are you on the same page as me in that sense? As you think that this might be a game where we start to see these guys like Demarcus Robinson or maybe Davis Allen or Tutu Atwell get more involved because all the attention has shifted to Puka Nacua and also probably to Cooper Kupp?
To a degree, yes. I will say that I've played this game before as a bettor. Said there's no way Puka's gonna have 100 yards. And then he just figures out a way. And I'm all sold. This is the Cooper Kupp game. This is the Tutu Atwell game. Oh, Demarcus Robinson with Carson Wentz. It's like I've been wrong Demarcus Robinson had 0 yards and 0 receptions last week, and Puka Nacua, I know they force fed him, even got a touchdown out of it. Like we were thinking that wasn't even going to be possible. They were just going to throw, quick screens, get him the record, and that would be it. But look, I got to tell you, I think this Detroit secondary has a lot of names, and I don't know why they're as bad as they are, but they've allowed over 2,000 yards in 8 games. The last 8 games, they've allowed 2,000 yards. 800 of those, over 800, have come at the expense of going up against Nick Mullins, Alexis. So I'm at the point where I wouldn't be surprised if there are 300-yard receivers in this game. This secondary, for whatever reason, is having the damnedest time trying to defend guys over the top. I don't know why. I don't know what is going on. There's a lot of lapses in coverage, and the Rams have had those as well. The thing about the Rams that stands out to me, and this is why I think that teams are going to be in trouble if the Rams don't have these lapses in coverage, is because the Rams are allowing one of the fewest completion percentage rates in the league. So they don't really let you, they are a pass funnel type of defense. They'll force Jared Goff to throw it and throw it short. He'll take some shots, sure, but Like this, if this defense doesn't really give up the big play, like I mean, they're going to be hard to beat. And that's the thing is like Detroit, they're giving up the big play left and right, and they're giving up a 64.4 completion percentage over those 8 games, as opposed to the Rams giving up less than 60, in the last 8 games. So I look at this defense and I'm like, I know they got guys like Brian Branch, and I know, Chauncey Gardner Johnson is back and he's healthy, and Kirby Joseph and Afadu Melifanu. What I would say about this defense is that they are an opportunistic defense. They're a team that's going to give up a lot of yards like Marcus Peters, but then they get that interception and you kind of forget about it for a little bit because it's a huge interception. If Matthew Stafford doesn't get picked in this game and he takes care of the ball and is able to get these yards, this game could be brutal. So I think like it goes back to what I was saying with the run game piece, Alexis. Like you can't, like how the Packers sold out to stop the run when Brett Rippon was quarterback. You can't do that when Stafford is the quarterback, because Stafford is going to hit you over the head repeatedly. And if Stafford's having a bad game, Kyren Williams is too good to just then focus on just Stafford. So it creates a dilemma. It really does. And, the only one that gave up more yards, receiving wise or passing wise, the Washington Commanders, who went 0-8 in the last 8 games. So I think Detroit, I mean, we'll see what happens. And obviously the addition of James Houston, like I said, that could be a big deal, but he also hasn't played since week 2. So he might be a little rusty. We'll see. But if nothing changed, Alexis, since now and last Sunday, the Rams, considering the way that they've played on offense, they should have no issue throwing all over the yard against this defense. And when that happens, now if you weren't able to run it with Kyren, you will then. So that's the beauty about it. And that's why the Rams match up so well against the Detroit Lions.
Well, that leads us perfectly into getting into our game predictions, Jake, because you kind of mentioned the passing game, which is one of mine. So that I'm going to start with mine, because my first prediction is that Matthew Stafford is going to throw for 3+ touchdowns against the Detroit Lions. And part of that is, again, I don't believe this is a revenge game, because if anybody knows how the trade went down, whatever, this is not a revenge game for Matthew Stafford. Everybody can calm down. But I do think he's going to show out at Ford Field like he did so many times back in the day. I think he's throwing for 3+ touchdowns against Detroit. Wouldn't be shocked if it was more than 3, but I'm going to say 3, at least 3. So that was my first prediction. Second prediction is I think we're seeing a Davis Allen touchdown. I really do. I don't know that we're going to see a lot of Davis Allen usage compared to everybody else. Like, I don't suspect that he's going to be on the field for a majority of the game. I think he's only be out there a little bit, but I just feel like in the red zone, I think the Rams are really going to try and get tricky on this Lions secondary. And I think that you could see Davis Allen in there as a decoy, catch a touchdown. I don't know exactly how it's going to happen, but I feel really good about Davis Allen going into this game. So that's my second prediction. Okay, defensively, I'm predicting at least two interceptions that Jared Goff is going to throw against the Rams. I think one of them is going to go to Ahkello Witherspoon. I think the other is going to go to John Johnson. Those are my 2 predictions for the 2 interceptions. So, yeah, I mean, I think that all my predictions are pretty realistic. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah. Let's see. This is tough because you took the Stafford one. I'm gonna say Kyren scores 2 touchdowns in this one. I think Stafford's gonna throw a lot of yards, but I think the Rams are gonna keep this thing very safe, very close to the vest when they have, a red zone possession. You have a red area, first goal or whatever. They're gonna give it to Kyren. I mean, they have a lot of experience in punching in the end zone. He has a nose for the end zone. When push comes to shove and things are going the way you want them to, you have Kyren Williams. And that's what happened with the Giants game. He was 3 of the 4 touchdowns he was responsible for. So I look at that as a 2 touchdown game, and I'm going to say he goes over 100 yards against a good run defense yet again. Wouldn't be the first time he did that. He did that against the Ravens. However, it is a big freaking deal because the Lions have yet to give up 100 yards to any running back. So it's only fitting that they give it up to the second best running back in the National Football League. Number two, I am going to go with the anti-Alexis prediction. I'm going to say that Puka Nacua is going, and like, we don't know like what CJ Stroud's going to do in his first ever playoff game as a rookie. I'm going to say Puka Nacua goes for 125 yards and a touchdown on 10 receptions. I think he is going to be utilized a ton in this game, and he might not even be the guy that gets over the top. I think they're just going to use him, move the chains. The thing with Puka Nacua is that he's next to Cooper Kupp. You can't double him, and you can't double Cooper Kupp. So really, just the way the Rams are schematically, it is so hard to take him out of the game. So I'm going to say he does that, as well as the Kyren Williams 2 touchdowns and 100 plus yards. The third and final prediction, I'm going to say the Rams defense that continues to play at a high level up front. They are going to force not one, but 2 fumbles on Jared Goff. I think we might see a Byron Young chase down strip sack, which I think would be fun. And I think we're going to see some help with Ernest Jones with the blitzing, but I think my guy, who he's only in there during run plays normally, but I think my guy Bobby Brown is going to force a fumble in this game. He does all the dirty work, does not get enough respect. I highlighted him in my recent video, but I think Bobby Brown will be in there on a play where they're expecting a run. They're going to go with a pass, and he's going to force a fumble on Jared Goff. That is my prediction. So those are my 3. That's what I got.
So getting into the score predictions, Jake, in this wild card playoff game, I am predicting that the Los Angeles Rams will win in Detroit on Sunday night. I think the score is going to be, and I've thought about this a lot. I've really thought about this because I've kind of gone back and forth, and I have had some trouble deciding exactly what I think the score is going to be. But I think that the Rams are going to win 31-27 against the Lions, which that's a high scoring game for a playoff game. But what we touched on in this episode is that, hey, both of these offenses are hot and they have a lot of weapons, I think, on both sides. So I think this could be a shootout, and that's what I'm going with. What about you?
Yeah, so I kind of go back and forth. I think I'm going to stick to my guns on this one. What I've been saying on other shows, I'm going to say they win 28-24. I think that goes about the same range as the over under. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. It's not the 49ers here. I think the Rams are the better team. I think they're a better team than the Lions. I really believe that. The Lions have some really talented players, and they have a lot of athleticism in that back end of the secondary. But truthfully, right now, the Rams are the hottest team in football. They've won 7 of the last 8. The next best, it's a few teams that are tied with 6 wins over the last 8 games. Since the bye week, the only game this team lost was on the road in Baltimore in the frigid cold, the pouring rain, against the MVP of the National Football League and Lamar Jackson, most likely, and arguably the best team in football in the Baltimore Ravens before they even lost Keaton Mitchell to injury. That is the game they lost. Aside from that, they've won every other game. And aside from that, they have a better strength of victory than the Lions. They've played a tougher schedule than the Lions. They've played the majority of their teams are above 500, and they've played half of their schedule against playoff teams. And they've played up against the 2 best teams in the National Football League, and the Ravens and the 49ers. So I really feel like this team's battle tested. I feel like this team's more talented. I think this team has more coaching. They have way more experience when you think about the fact that Dan Campbell's never coached with this team in the playoffs. Jared Goff has playoff experience, but it was with the Rams in 2020. He hasn't been back since. And when you look at the rest of this is a young group. They might be considered ahead of schedule by some. They're not as good as I expect them to be at this point in the season. Just to put it, bluntly. But I think this is a good football team. I think the Rams are a good football team, but I think the Rams, the last 8 games, are in a great football team. I wouldn't say an elite, but I think they're close to that, and it's why I think that they're going to win this game and they have a shot at the Super Bowl.
I totally agree with everything that you just said. I just think that the Rams are. I think that they're flowing better right now, and I think that, like you said, they've gone up against, some better teams and they've hung in there with them, and this has been as of late. I feel like the Lions have struggled as of late. You watch some of their games. I've had the opportunity to watch probably out of their last 5 games a good bit of at least 3 or 4 of those, and they just have not really looked that great. I mean, they've had some flashes. I think guys like Jamar Gibbs and St. Brown have looked good, but they just seem to be, a little shaky, especially Jared Goff. And I think the Rams are having the opposite problem, which isn't a problem. They've been getting hot at the right time. So I just feel really good about the Rams going against this Lions team. I really Rams are going to win, and I think they're going to advance to the divisional round.
I agree. I mean, I think when you and I came into the season, we had him going to the playoffs. I had him 10-7. You had him 9-8. We both had playoffs. I don't know where you had them losing. I had them losing to the Lions before the season started in the divisional round of the playoffs. That was the Lions as the number 1 seed. That was the Lions improving on their defense and getting better against the pass. They haven't done that. It's the same freaking secondary with different players. And my issue is that the only team outside of the 49ers in the NFC that I truly feel is a Super Bowl contender are the Rams. I feel like the Lions have the offense, but and here's let me be very clear here. You don't need a top tier defense to win the Super Bowl. You don't. History shows that you don't. But when you're giving up that many yards through the air, that's a problem. And the Rams that just started creeping up a little bit, and we're hoping that was just a few of those games that just, bad, miscommunication. It's been all year with this team. All year. We saw Justin Fields dominate Jared Goff. They somehow won that game, but I haven't forgotten that. I know you haven't. And you go back to the Seattle game, week 2. Jared Goff pick 6. Seattle wins. That's the same team the Rams pulverized on their own turf. And then you look at the Ravens and the Packers game. I just think there's too many instances this year where on the resume, the Rams, they've had some moments like 43-20 against Dallas, but that thing that was without Kyron, that was without Havenstein, that was with half a half without Stafford, right? The Packers game 20-3 wasn't indicative of what the actual game was. That score wasn't indicative at all of what the actual game was. And Rippon was the quarterback, right? Their worst games are really those 2 games. They haven't really had any horrible games. They've been in just about every game, and the resume speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Since the bye, they've just been so impressive to me. And when you look, it's like, oh, well, they beat the Giants by 1 point. Then that Giants team goes and they beat the crap out of Philly, who's in the playoffs, Or my favorite, well, Joe Flacco threw all over them. He should be in a retirement home. Oh, look at Joe Flacco now. He might win comeback player of the year. The Browns have a shot at the Super Bowl. He's better than Deshaun Watson. That's the point I'm making. And the Saints team they beat, by the way, that they absolutely dominated on Thursday Night Football, Alexis, that was one of the hottest teams in football. Had they gotten in the playoffs, they could have done damage. That's this Rams team. They have the resume, and they haven't shown these red flags at times like the Lions have. That this team I'm not picking. So I feel really good about the Rams.
I do too. I feel good about the Rams, and I think we should end it on that note with this episode. I don't know how apparent it's going to be, Jake, to everybody that we had major connection problems during this. So if everyone is like, oh, well, why wasn't Alexis as talkative as normal? It's because I quite literally had connection for maybe half speed and then just gone. We don't know what's going on. Everything says it's working fine, but it wasn't. Jake is about to have to pull off like a Michael Jordan flu game with the editing on this
I
because
was just going to say,
it's
this is like,
just, yeah,
oh,
this is
man.
editing hell. So hopefully it doesn't come across too bad, but if you've made it to this point, thank you for sticking around. Deepest apologies that things might get a little shuffled and sound not as eloquent as they normally do. But the point stands, guys. We are predicting a Rams win on Sunday night, and we are going to come back after that game with a recap episode, and hopefully it is with a win and it isn't our last episode of the season. And yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic. I'm very excited for this wild card game. But guys, we'll be back. Until then, as always, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. You can follow us on social media at Downtown Rams. You can follow me on Twitter at the Alexis Kraft. You can follow Jake at Jake A. Bogan. And until next time, guys, stay safe, take care, and go Rams.